Hi there everybody, my name is Kate and welcome to my channel, Trinergy Awakens Naturally. So it's very natural today. I am scrubbing walls and floors and all kinds of stuff and just had a wonderful download, a spark of inspiration that explained some stuff to me that I'd been kind of messing with in my own mind. And I want to share that with you because I think it's critically important, especially for the touchy-feely people in the world and also the people that oftentimes are not very touchy-feely or don't understand why. They're very open, warm, loving, and physically affectionate some of the time, and other times just repulsed by it. That's the case for me, is that I'm a touchy-feely kind of person. However, I don't interact well with other touchy-feely kind of people, and that involves hugging at the bare minimum. When people want to get real close physically, my first question is why? Why do you want to hug me? Why do you want to be in proximity to me? Why does it feel like you might physically suffocate me if you come and breathe air too close to me, because you seem like you're consuming more than your fair share? I feel a bit of your presence in me and around me, and I don't really appreciate that. And so let me set it up for you about hugs and empaths, high sensitives, people that neurodivergent community, healers, whomever, anybody, but especially I notice this a lot in the spiritual community where I live and do my best work. I find that that's kind of an automatic assumption that happens, is that, well, you're a healer, so you must want to get physical. And that's absolutely not true. I've learned my lesson about how it is to allow people into my space and allow them to have some physical reassurance without getting too involved in, making a connection that is not a good or healthy one, or that feels good or healthy for me. And if it does not feel good and healthy for me, then it is not a healthy exchange already. So it doesn't matter whether someone else could use a hug. If I just know that don't open that door, then I do not. I offer either a side hug or a close, just on the shoulder or something, because it is the nature of the work that I do to be a coach. And I coach in all different scenarios. I work with the neurodivergent community, where touching is not very appropriate because it's in a Western model of therapy, and so I abide by it there. However, occasionally, a pat on the back or a gesture or something. I also work with prisoners, felons, in a Federal Bureau of Prisons, in the Federal Bureau of Prisons, and there's no contact there, and so I can convey and put my hand out, the gesture of, hey, really high five, etc. However, there's no connection there at all. Those are some of the most starved, people physically, and I don't mean, lower nature. I'm talking, we don't get often very nurtured out in the real world, much less back in prison. That's not a nurtured, comforted, physical exchange that is healthy or good, usually, for anybody. However, and I also, let's segue into understanding that I also work in the spiritual community, where people come with their spiritual crises, etc., or they have questions, or they ask, for some help to get through a roadblock, and I provide that. That's part of the work that I do, is to bring the energy through by channeling, etc. However, that's not the greatest part of why I'm here. The greatest part, 333, of why I'm here is simply to say that when people attach, in Western therapeutic model, when I'm in my neurodivergent community and I have to operate, as a 3D individual, my spirit obviously is with me. However, the way I'm going to share that is not so physically. The intimacy that is built, that trust is built in a different way that doesn't involve as much physical affection. The same is true with my Bureau of Prisons, the felons that I work with. That intimacy that they're craving to be seen and validated has to be done in a different way to nurture the soul, etc. Because that's just a no-no. That I'm not making contact. I'm allowed to shake hands, and I don't even do that. The last class I graduated, I shook their hand and said, congratulations, go, go, go. And that was the end of it. But we did not have physical contact, because that's not the level of comfort I feel okay with, nor do I want to start something, in the wrong direction by allowing someone to assume things about the physical contact we've made. And I learned my lesson. The most potent lesson so far about that is that my neurodivergent community understands that very well. My felons, they understand that very well too. And it was in the spiritual community where I started struggling hard in the last few years, becoming a more prominent in my life to become a healer with energy, etc. It became more important, more time consuming, etc. of my life. So I had to learn boundaries very early. And unfortunately, still learning them a little bit, on the fly with people as they come by with their weird stuff. And why are hugs weird sometimes in the spiritual community is because sometimes people imprint, they have such a need for physical affection, etc., that when there's a hug or some gesture made with someone that they have literally imprinted on emotionally, they're so I'm sweating up a storm, they're so needy in terms of their physical affection and nurturing needs that a hug can signal into a part of the brain that, oh, no, I'm not your mother, I'm not your mother's source, I am not that, nor am I a candidate for whatever it is that you think might be coming in the future, especially if they're male-oriented. Has nothing to do with dating or me being a frigid lizard or something like that. It has to do with the appropriate boundary, is that I'm there in the capacity to help you get through roadblocks. And if you attach to me in a weird way, that's going to be a roadblock in and of itself, and you'll have to go away if you cannot understand where that boundary is. And taking people in a fragile place where they've been emotionally kind of taken down, and then allow them to get too close in that intimacy thing beyond just the intimacy of you just shared, a pretty intimate part of you with me, and we're working through it energetically. I no longer want to follow that up with getting too close to people in terms of how much I'm going to hug them and comfort them and be in their space. It used to make me very uncomfortable to watch people struggling with their pain and to cry and to grieve, and to know how many times have I cried myself to sleep that I just want to hug. I want to be able to, blah, blah, blah. And I understand better now why it is that that's a need to self-soothe. And if we look to someone else to provide that intimacy and that nurturing that we already didn't receive, if we don't know how to give that to ourselves, then we're actually seeking it out here somewhere. And I'll give you for instance of how this really went south in my life was that I had a male client that he was kind of a one and done. He just came, to do one session, and that was going to be it, and that was fine. It's just that at the end of that, I could see some doe eyes and like some suggestion that, this is wonderful. I just think you're great. I mean, a lot of people get to that place of like, you're just so amazing. This is great. I just love you. And I kind of take that with a grain of salt and go, yes, I know you've reached a new place in you where you're recognizing something beautiful because you've been given a safe place to do that, and where you've been held in high regard and kindness. However, please do not mistake that for we are in now, or we are attached at the hip and we're suddenly besties. I don't do that either. If you're my client, you're my client, and that's a kind of a doctor-patient thing that it rides that way with me. I'm from a traditional medicine background in EMS, and there's no, I don't take your number 808. I don't call you later. I don't check the hospital to see how you were doing. I don't follow up. That's an inappropriate boundary. No matter how much I may have appreciated, the kindness, etc., or the exchange that we've had, or no matter what kind of heroic thing I may have done for someone, it still doesn't automatically parlay into we're besties, we're good to hang out and to keep in touch, etc. That's literally really just, there's no way to convey that, because we met during a moment of crisis. Same thing in my energy work. We meet in a moment of crisis, or you're taken to your moment of crisis with whatever that block is. And to have someone that's safe and kind and nurturing and very mothering is very okay. It's appropriate. However, that has to shut down entirely. And this man that came to me for his, one and done was got attached, and I had of course given my phone number so that we could meet where we were going to be meeting, and we followed through with that. And then I started getting some messages that were quite disturbing to me, that it finally there was a lot of just checking to see how you're doing, and really hammering down in the department of the spirituality. I'm sending Archangel Michael to protect you, etc., which that already weirds me out a bit. That please don't send me 9/29 29. Anything, I'm cool. However, I didn't want to squash this person's need to feel like he was participating in my life in some way that made him feel comfortable. However, no, that was really not okay, because those doe eyes that were kind of looking at me, that, you know, I did tell him in the moment, yeah, it brings up a lot of emotions when we have these very big shifts in consciousness, and it's just the safe place. You know, I'm nothing superpower here. I'm a regular person. You know, I have billy goat hair I have to trim, you know, etc. I snore sometimes, and sometimes I have booger in my nose ring. You know, it just happens. I don't want to break the illusion. However, I need to break the illusion, because I can see the doe eyes sometimes, and it happens with women too. You know, we have an instant, you know, infatuation on one side of that sometimes that people, you know, don't even realize they've gone to. And everybody up to that point that I've worked with, they made their way through that and came back around as we were, you know, we're landing now. The balloon ride is over, and, you know, you're going to go home and balloon on your own, you know, et cetera, because I'm not a long-term fix for anybody. This is you've got a block and you need some help to move through that. That's, I'm your girl for that. However, the rest of me does not come as a package deal that we suddenly are friends, or we're dating, or we have some intimate relationship or connection. That's an intimate relationship and connection that's made with self, you know, that's just being identified. It's happened for me, you know, with healers that I've worked with too. However, I understood the boundaries over because, you know, I got it. I'm not sure if that's, you know, necessarily intuitive. However, it was also reinforced by the people, energy healers and Western medicine providers both, who were very clear on their boundary. And so because I hadn't been challenged with anybody taking their doe eyes into the future with me, I did not know what to do with this person. And I go, well, I just don't want to squash, and I don't want to be mean, and really kind of chewing on that and thinking, well, this is uncomfortable because I've not answered you a couple of times and you're not picking up the soft boundary. And I'm a huge one for giving some soft boundaries first, so that when that, you know, sharp no, you know, what are you doing? Please stop. When that comes, there's, you know, evidence, 1144. If the person is going to do any self-reflection, they would have the evidence of, yeah, maybe there was something I said that made this woman uncomfortable. And the days of me, 1155, working with people every step of the way and say, you know, I'm not really comfortable with that. I've learned to, no, that's a dead end, because if somebody already doesn't understand and they're not picking up the hints, and I energetically work with people too. This particular individual, after I got a couple of those, you know, just checking to see how you're doing, and like, you know, it's a Monday, and it's a Monday. It is what it is. And I'm going on with my life and doing my thing, and I'm not reporting into you, and I really don't feel like that's a good thing to, you know, cause much action, put some gas on, and cause, you know, some idea on the other side of this that this is headed somewhere. It's not. And so I just very tentatively just kind of was working in the energy with, what is this? And I could see, I reflected back on the session, and I understand where the block is. I know what it is, at least the one that we were dealing with, and I got that. However, the attachment and, you know, process and the imprinting thing, that was an imprint of you. And for as long as this man would come through believing that I carry that imprint, and that it's, you know, in me, and that we have to be connected to bring that sense of, you know, comfort and nurturing that he needed, that made me just super uncomfortable, and I couldn't figure out why until I got the last text message that I did hug him at the end of it, because he was, you know, in that weird space, and he said, I just so appreciate blah, blah, blah. Yeah, and I appreciate that you're here. I love doing this work. It's fantastic, you know, have a great life, etc. He wasn't from the area, so, you know, like, okay, no problem. And so when I reflected on that and thought, okay, well, move this energy away and put a boundary, and I had some of those very unspoken out loud directly to the person, because I don't want to shame people. However, I have those energetic conversations where I speak out loud. I visualize that person and say, look, you know, this is something that is in your mind. However, it's not in mine, and I'm very uncomfortable. Please go away on your own, and please do not make me have to bring this out to the fore with you. However, you know, you've been warned that I'm not comfortable with what's happening here, and trying to step it through the paradigm of going back and forth with my boundary. If somebody already doesn't get it, and then it takes, a couple of times. I was slow on this one to do the eject button, man. 14, change. I was slow to eject on that, I thought. And yet, I did release him several times. However, we've had a big, huge cycle recently of release and let go, etc. So a lot of people came swinging back through, and, this person did not take the hint that I'm not comfortable with the things you said. And what really stuck for me was that he actually made the comment that I can still feel the imprint, literally the word, the imprint of your body against mine when we hugged. And that made me want to throw up, absolutely just bleh, when I heard it. And I thought, oh my God, how rude is that? That I want to vomit at the idea of this man. That's a kind thing. No, Kate, that is the programming that tells you a kind soul just let somebody envision the imprint of your body on them. That is an inappropriate boundary that F no, and he got to go. And so I very sharply, severely told him in spirit then, look, I'm done, friend. If you come back in, it's not going to be pleasant. Please leave me alone. And at the time, I was literally busy doing something else, and I got distracted, deleted his number. Usually I just delete people. Literally, my phone contact list goes down, after these major shifts, it goes down, to the bare minimums of, I'm releasing you from this level, from a microcosmic level, and you are really going to need to hear it from here. Feel it in your heart. Do not feel inspired to call me. I'm not interested, because if it has to go there and we keep stepping this out, this is going to be an unpleasant conversation. And so, after that, I cut it in my mind. I deleted his number, and I just went on. However, I did not block him. If I hear from people again after I've been through that internal process and I've spoken and we've got an infraction still looming, or there's another one that's even more aggressive than the last, yeah, that's going to be a block. I block as a means of reminding my spirit and my soul that I do understand this is a blocked, absolutely no access, no contact situation. And it's not to be cruel. It's to leave people with, I wonder what it is about me that this person blocked me, if they're going to do any self-reflection. However, this gentleman did not display that you're not getting the idea of what self-reflection is because I've ignored you. I've not answered you, and when I did answer you in the very beginning, it was very cursory. I'm fine, things are well, blah, blah, blah. Very casual, and every third or fourth one. But by the time the imprint thing came, I deleted and kept on moving. And since then, it's been a few weeks, people dipping in and dipping out. No, thank you, I'm not interested in a drive-by. I'm not a gas station where you're going to just come fill up on something that imprints on you. Okay, no, I don't want to hear from you. However, I did. And when I did not respond to the text, I was guided. I listened and said, shall I block this? No, let it go. Just let it go. And I thought, okay, well, that's because I recently heard from him again that did not pick up on the fact that I totally have ignored the handful over the last 6 or 8 weeks that you sent to me. I have ignored you. And asked you to leave energetically. And the last one was a direct phone call, which I am on do not disturb. I don't answer my phone. I screen heavily and I delete like a mofo, and block routinely because just because we made a business connection or just because, I have your number doesn't mean that's a long-term commitment. I'm not into that stuff. I'm into people that, are into the things that I'm in. And this is a work-related thing. So I pick up phone numbers on potential clients and working in collaboration and stuff like that all the time. And I delete them and move on. And really, do I have to block them when I'm dealing with grown people who are moving through or have moved through enough of their issues that they don't have inappropriate boundaries with me? But what I really got in my download a little while ago as I'm scrubbing and cleaning and thinking, ew, that just really bothered me because it happened just recently that a phone call that, sir, I'm not sure what it is you need to know, but said on the voicemail, this is so-and-so, and I thought, if you have to tell me who you are, that when we met, etc., and then went on with a whole thing about what he'd been doing with his world, very finite very specific rather detail about his life of things that were happening with the move that he was making, which dude, if you knew enough spiritually, energetically, your mouth just told me that you heard me enough to know that I'm not comfortable and I'm not answering you. You felt the need to explain who you were, and then once you caught me up with what I already knew, you're going to tell me all about, the boundaryless person is going to go into their whole thing about, yep, and moving to my area and stuff like this. Like, no, I don't care if you're moving to the area or not. That's fantastic. I'm happy. I said that, several months ago whenever I met you, that I hope that you enjoy this area as much as I do. 1919, I love this area. It's fantastic. The spiritual community is huge. I don't personally interact with it. I didn't say that. I just said it's huge. I do my own little thing. I hermit away and I do my thing. I come out and I play where I know, and I, do my jobs as I am paid to do them. And I don't latch on in places, nor do I let people intentionally latch on to me. However, it's caused me to really rethink how much I'm going to be willing to connect on a physical level with people when they're not already understanding the boundaries. The first infraction, it just felt so severe, and I realized, no, this person did not understand what was happening, and it didn't matter. I could have said it right out loud, but if it takes going past, ignoring someone, that's a hungry ghost that I can't feed, man. That's inside you. And whatever that was that opened up during that session, it was beautiful. It was absolutely gorgeous. I was there to witness that. However, I was witness to it. I didn't create it. I didn't do anything except allow an open channel of safety and kindness and compassion for someone who has deep wounds, clearly, with no boundaries, to understand themselves better. However, I didn't heal him. I didn't unblock him. I did nothing except provide the space for his soul to do what it needed to do to recognize himself as a mirror of what he was standing in front of, that it wouldn't have gone there to that place if he was not ready to be there at that place. However, he missed the boat as a human on, oh cool, I found my, whatever, and I am not that for anybody at all. If I'm that for somebody, then, oh dear, what happens when I need to shave my chin hair, or I have booger in my nose in a restaurant, or I drop salad down into my bra, or I fall down or something? It's happened. And so the illusion is broken. And I'm like, dude, I want to help you get to the illusion breaking part very early by just ignoring you, after a while. And the illusion didn't break. So at this point, block and keep it moving, that left me with, I wonder how mean that is. Well, I wonder how meaner it would be not to just push that back, dude. You have made me uncomfortable to the point I've allowed you to. However, I've changed my mind, and I'm not covering any more of the wounded bird feelings that might come from people that really need healing. And I'm not the healer. I am not the healer. I am a healing arts practitioner, of course. However, I'm very clear on my role in that, is that I provide the space, and spirit is what comes through for whatever that face needs. And I look to the high healers that I work with. They do the exact same thing. Even though I love the person who helps me do some of the fascia release, she's a beautiful soul, absolutely adore her. However, I'm not in love with her. I'm in love with her work. 2222. I'm in love with the space that she can help me get to, and we have mutual respect for the gifts that we have. And I pay for services. We do a side hug, high five. We do whatever. However, there's a clear understanding. And so I've learned, in this process going forward, that the way to deal with people who are upfront and showing me they already don't understand the boundary. I've just never had anybody that took it so far with, oh my God, you just really are not going to want to get this unless it turns into an actual discussion, which, why would I take the time to do that? That would be to protect the mushy feelings of somebody else. And it could be perceived as cruel. It could be perceived as a lot of things. However, I've been on the losing end of that, and I was left with the residue of somebody else telling me that they're imagining my body imprinting on them. No, dude, you're imagining the energy of some mommy wounding that is imprinted on you, that's hungry for that to be solved for you. And that's very different. 2323 is a big 5-5 of I'm alive with my evolution and my change. And the new evolutionary standard that I have is that, nah, somebody gives me the doe eyes and they don't pull out of that, that's going to need to be, even if you move back to this area, even if you're in this area, this is inappropriate, because I'm not going to be paid just to be somebody's something. That is not how I operate at all. It doesn't matter what the money exchange is. It's the energy exchange. If it's not fair, and it doesn't feel good to me, there's something wrong with it. And after I reviewed all of that, looked at me and went, no, that's really about inappropriate boundaries. And that was me needing to learn perhaps to catch it earlier. However, he did catch me by surprise with, you just don't seem to want to get this. You really just want to push this somewhere that I never gave you. Not even one time did I give you some hint or some suggestion that this was going into something more than a business relationship. It is not my fault that the spiritual community is a mushy-gushy, touchy-feely kind of group. And I often find that when I go to different places for different events, I don't hug. Generally speaking, I offer my hand, which seems, somewhat cold and sterile, and that's fine. I don't care how people perceive me, because the open healer who just hugs everybody can cause other people who are in a wounded spot and really hungry, I mean just desperate, hungry ghost stuff, they want to be nurtured, and physical nurturance and activating our nerve ends is very important in the process of healing, especially for high sensitive empaths, etc., that have been wounded deeply. However, divine feminine energy is what was ignited in that man. Masculine energy is what was ignited in that man. His own package was ignited in him. However, he kept looking at me, and I did redirect him that, yeah, this is not me. I'm not taking credit for the work you did. And so I guess what I really want to convey is that even though sometimes we make, choices with allowing people into a boundary that they cannot ultimately have, maintain, or respect appropriately, sometimes we step that back very severely, that nope, you aren't allowed in here, you don't maintain that well, you don't handle that well, and this is not the level of work that I do to have to go into remedial education and review constantly of something that, to me, that's a basic standard. I don't hug anybody without asking, and I don't ask very many people very often, would you like a hug, is sometimes when I'm working, not working, when I see a friend or something. However, I just don't keep people like that around me, that we're physically like that. However, the woman that helps me with my fascial release, she's a beautiful soul, and a hug, a short one, and there's no embracing. As a matter of fact, I just realized that with that person, the reason he was feeling that imprint is that he was 26, that's an 8-8, hello. The reason he was feeling that imprinting is he really wouldn't let me go. Dear God, I just realized that's part of what really creeped me out, and block definitely, and block again, that's not okay. That I was, trying to make that appropriate, professional, whatever, that I understand you've just been kind of disemboweled right here and kind of pasted back together. So let me give you the little send off. When that turned into I felt uncomfortable, and I started to reach, and he actually tightened into me, and it was very squishy, like my body just like mushed into him, and I did not remember that until now. So please forgive me for feeling that right here, right now, that was so uncomfortable that I, literally just started pulling away like that. And he got it, that this is really awkward, and it's uncomfortable, that I'm kind of let go now. And I just tossed that off to, yeah, okay. However, I will never toss that off again and misunderstand what's in front of me, which is someone who is very hungry for affection. And that's fine. Divine masculine needs to, and I have a special place in my heart for masculines, because there's a lot of wounding from women, actual women. Their mothers have done a job on them a lot of times, and then if their mother didn't, completely eviscerate them or emasculate them, then some hard-ass woman came through and did it for them, to finish them off. And so that's kind of where I thought he was, and he was. However, I'm still not that, and I'm not going to be interested in doing more than helping that man to understand a female energy that's very kind and is loving and can help you. However, dude, this is my job. We're not on a date, and anybody that can't translate that right away, they're not my work. They have more work to do before they're allowed to get physical with anybody, hopefully. However, that wasn't my angle to tell him anything about himself other than this is my boundary, and I had a hard time separating from that. I've never had anybody kind of capture me in a hug where I just I mean, I knew what he meant when he said it. I'm like, oh God, that's what that was. Oh geez. Yeah, that I literally felt it too of, oh, I'm not all that big of a person. And, this was mushing into a bigger size, a taller version of, human than is typical. And I just kind of got squished into it. And I'm like, suffocating in your chest was not part of my plan here. And I felt guilty for half a second, for a whole second, for a whole month probably. I felt kind of guilty and ashamed of myself that that's a man that's, just needy because he has issues. Well, just needy because he has issues still made me highly uncomfortable. And I'm not carrying around the residue of sexual trauma and sexual weirdness, or igniting something in me unnecessarily because I have history of being, held in places where I didn't want to be and being inappropriately dealt with physically, and that whole role of romance and all of that stuff, that's already very weird to make assumptions in a in a professional setting. However, I get it. It's just, let me handle this with grace like a dignified woman, or it's going to have to get real cagey in a minute. We're going to go Heart Family Dungeon if you need to learn how to, handle the smackdown that's coming. And it got to be too much in my mind. And so I just skipped it all together and blocked it. However, the best way that I can transmute that is to possibly put it out there on the airwaves for anybody else who's a healer of any kind, and men with women. It doesn't matter. It's just that my clientele typically is men. I resonate with men a whole lot with that, masculine wounding from a very nasty woman, etc. I get that, that's one of the gifts that I was given. However, abusing the gift or allowing it to be abused is not where that's going to work for anyone, especially someone who has the ability to really help someone that you have just ruined the opportunity for anything I could do because you tainted it and made it weird, and I can never look at you the same way. It's not a matter of being unkind or unforgiving. It's a matter of, I don't even know you and you've stepped over it. You're not worth it to me. I wouldn't invest any time with you anyway outside of this, because you've already demonstrated you have a hard time hearing and understanding social dynamics enough to get the boundaries, especially when they're physically drawing. And I'm still going to be flabbergasted for a second about that 3113, about how long he held it there. That just, I can't believe that I forgot it. However, anyway, that's the importance that I wanted to convey, and the way to transmute that and move that up out and in and out of me is to express it in a way that allows other people hopefully to understand that just because there's wounding and just because there's a physical hungry, there's a physical need, we all need human touch. Everybody needs human touch. However, I don't need human touch so badly that I'm willing to feel discomfort or weird or activated in some icky part that doesn't really reside in me. That's somebody asking me to take their baggage and their, garbage instead of them, instead of understanding that that's really about you. And I don't want anything to do with that, because the work that it takes me to recover from those kinds of mistakes or those kinds of misjudgments of character, that was a minor one compared to where I've been way hella wrong in the past. And I've learned, that giving away some part of me, especially my physicality, to help someone else grieve or to help someone else, carry their load does not work very often, because people that are carrying that kind of baggage and that kind of weight often are so desperate to be touched, to be seen, to be heard. However, the most offensive person that's come into my world for healing was in the open, wide community, the spiritual community, and not in the Western medicine model, and not in the Bureau of Prisons, a federal prison with felons. There's more respect. There's more eye contact and engagement there, where intimacy can be built, trust can be built. However, if I can't trust someone to physically release me, what? Can you understand the nature of that? And the answer is no. So the time it would take to explain him Lucy on it, That's not me, and not nor is it my work. It is to leave him with the mystery to solve, if he wanted to. But there's a whole lot more mysteries to solve before he'd wonder why I didn't answer him or why he's blocked, and has no way that if he ever does come my way, that he won't know how to reach me. He won't know where I live or anything about me, and I'm not in that organization that I met him there, so that I'm not tied to that. So and those people do not know where I am either, for that very reason, that I'm a private person and I like to keep it that way. However, I no longer kept my private status by opening up to someone that I didn't read well enough to understand that hungry ghost is a hungry ghost, and it will freak me out, quite potentially. And there's nothing wrong with the healed part of me, or that I need healing necessarily. The healing was in understanding that, oh yeah, that feels weird already, and he's demonstrated to you he doesn't want to let you go, and then he's following on. Put it together, Kate, and don't ever do that again. Don't wait. And so hopefully this helps somebody out here that might hear that. But no matter what, I hope you're doing well today, no matter what part of the day you're in. And remember to get within your skin, because your divine is absolutely fine, and it can tell you every single time where the boundary is of what feels good. And also, when we get really good about knowing what feels okay in our body and what feels very comforting in our body, when we get used to being able to touch ourselves, and meet our own needs. When I shower or bathe, I stroke my own skin, because I need to be nurtured as well. However, if I'm not able to do that for myself, then I'm going to be asking somebody out there to do that, and I may miss the cue in a huge way of I'm maybe overstepping myself, such as that gentleman did. Absolutely no awareness whatsoever, and that's not my work to bring him up to speed on that, and that's determined by me, not him. So anyway, take care of yourselves, my friend, and remember to get within your skin, because you're divine. It absolutely is fine. It's lovely, and it can keep you safe every single time. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you again next time. Bye-bye, friends.